See, everything in life can be turned from a no to a yes by questioning and not telling. And that's one of the things that in all of my training, I say, question and listen, don't talk and tell. And if you ask the right questions, you'll find out what you need to know to turn no's into yeses.
Hey y'all, welcome to Selling with Social, the podcast that helps marketers increase marketing qualified leads, sales reps to shatter sales results, and sales leaders to grow as leaders. Each show, we interview sales, marketing, and social media practitioners, leaders, and influencers to help you connect, close more deals, build stronger relationships with clients, and improve your sales productivity. I'm Mario Martinez Jr. You're now listening to Selling with Social. Tom Hopkins, I am so excited that you are joining me here on Selling with Social. Thank you so much, my friend. I couldn't believe how difficult it was to nail you down. I mean, you're the man of the hour. You're so busy, and I am truly honored to have you on the show here with me.
Well, thank you, Mario, and I'm excited. I love whenever I get people that are excited about selling, and especially what you're doing in social. It's fabulous.
Well, thank you. As I look at your particular background, I think you're on, is it book number 18 now?
Number 18 came out in April, and that's when buyers say no. And that little rascal is outselling in the first 6 months all the other books I've ever written. So I'm pumped.
Well, I just want to go on record and say, if I could be like Tom Hopkins, I can't move my first book on to just get it out in 2017. So I'm going to have to figure out what that secret sauce is here to get into at least the number one book. That's what I'm looking for, man.
You really want to do it because there's such credibility when you are an author of a book. You'll be amazed how when people say anything about you and you say, oh, yes, I've authored a book. So I am going to be on top of you to get that book done.
You know Gerhard Gauschwatner?
Yes.
So Gerhard said to me, I'll be your accountability partner. And I said, fantastic. But the problem is I'm avoiding him.
Unaccountability.
The unaccountability. So I need another accountability partner. Please check up on me, man, in 30 days and ask me if I can move the ball along any further. And I will be for sure. But just as a background to you, I know we just talked about you're an author. You're obviously one of the most well-known, influential sales leaders and trainers and speakers out there in the circuit. You have been in sales for a tremendously long time. You get the secret handshake of the salesperson, which I love. And essentially, a lot of the things that you teach are really sales skills that get results. So I know that about you, but we've got marketers, we've got enablement folks, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got sales folks that are listening in right now. Do us a favor, Tom. Just tell us a little bit about you, your background, where you came from, and how you got to where you're at.
Well, I think my background probably is a mere reflection of numerous people right now hearing and seeing this message. But I, of course, went to high school and left high school, went to college, but only made it for 3 months. And after 90 days of college, I thought that's not for me. And I disappointed my father greatly when I quit college. In fact, I came home midterm. He said, what are you doing home? I said, Dad, I quit college.
Oh, man.
And he said, son, you're my son, so I'll always love you. Even though now I know based on that decision, you'll never amount to anything. So in a way, that was my first motivational talk.
Yeah.
And I had something to prove. And my uncle that night came to dinner, and he was the general manager of a steel company. So he hired me to carry steel on Dodger Stadium when they were building that in 1962. And I carried steel for a year. I'm 5'7", but I was 6'2" when I started. So it really took an effect on me.
I love it.
So my dad said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. He says, look, you got a nice way with people. Why don't you get a real estate license? So I was 18. And I went to school and I failed my exam 3 times. And finally, the 4th time I got a license, and a broker didn't want to hire me because I was not only 19 now, I looked about 16. I had no clothes to dress for real estate, and I didn't have a car. I'm on a motorcycle. So it was like, kid, no way. Well, finally, I convinced a broker to hire me. And it was like finding my niche. And I think the niche in life is when you find something you love to do that's not work, that you do so well, you make a lot of money.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened when I got into real estate. And I spent 8 glorious years selling homes in Simi Valley, California. And the year I sold one a day, average 365, which had never been done for that year. And the National Association of Realtors said, come and speak at the National Convention in Los Angeles. And I showed up and I just taught them what I said. And that's when it took off, because everybody wants to know what to say. Because in selling or in life, we're all in the word business. Yep. The words you say, the feelings you create, the emotions you allow to happen in a conversation determine your success. So that's kind of how it all started for me. And I've been now 40 years, every week on a plane, it's somewhere in the world where they have salespeople teaching them how to get a check. And that's been my life.
That's fantastic. Well, interesting story. It reminds me of when I was 18 years old and I was trying to get into college. I was always the kid who had to work super, 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 super hard, right? Till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning just to get that A minus, maybe a B plus, A, maybe an A minus. And I remember I took the SATs, and this was to get into UC Berkeley. I had just a passion and desire to get into Cal, UC Berkeley. And I took the SATs 3 times. And the darn thing, I just, I think that the whole thing is garbage. My highest score was a 990 out of 1,600.
Wow.
And everybody said, you're not getting into UC Berkeley. And I was like, well, I didn't think I was going to get in either. But here was the thing, was interesting. So I actually had $41 in my checking account, came from a poor background. And I remember the day that I wrote a check for $40 out of 41, because you had to pay $40 to submit your application to the UC system. And I wrote that check for $40 out of 41, applied to UC Berkeley with my 990 SAT score. And everybody said, save your money, don't waste it, you're not going to get in. And guess what happened, Tom?
You got in.
I got in.
You didn't take the rejection. You kept going for it.
Exactly right. And there was a lot of other things that I did in order to be able to succeed. For example, focusing in on all the other elements that they looked for a well-rounded student, the kid who did football, the kid who did mock trial and the Model UN Club and all these other things. And so that actually helped me out. But your story reminded me of the conversations that I had, which was, how did you do it? And I had to honestly say, well, I'm not really quite sure.
Yeah.
I think it was everything else that was part of getting that score there. But that's a little personal history and personal story for me. But I love your story. Fantastic. And you've been going strong for this long. And you've obviously built a name for yourself and clearly a model that salespeople and sales leaders could follow in your footsteps. But if people were to look at your social profiles, tell us one thing that they wouldn't find on your social profiles about you.
Well, I think they'd probably not find the original beginning of my career, which was to fail the real estate exam, 3 times, to have no broker wanting to hire me, to have everybody say I would never succeed. And then I was so determined to prove to my father I would succeed that I paid a tremendous price. My first 3 years, when I finally got my real estate license, I only took 3 days off for 3 years, which are Christmas days. I was the first one in the office every morning, last one probably to get home every night, and I outworked everyone. And that's really, I think, why I outsold anyone in real estate in California the years I was selling homes. And of course, that's the only reason they asked me to come speak and teach. And then they said, you got to write a book. And of course, it took me 3 years to write my first book. And now, of course, I'm very fortunate to have wonderful people that help me, and we'll get a subject and I'll give them an audio cassette or CD of what I want the book to be. And, they help me get it done. But writing a book is a thing everybody has to do or wants to do, but you just got to make yourself do it.
Yeah. So I love what you said. Failure equaled success.
And handling failure and rejection is really the keys to getting the yeses in life. And that's one reason why people have said to me, Tom, you wrote this new book, When Buyers Say No. And the reason I did was because nothing happens in selling till someone says no. I mean, if you think about it, if there weren't two letters N-O, we wouldn't need selling. We wouldn't need salespeople. We'd all just mail out, here's something you'd like, send us the money. And there'd never be any sales. And companies would go out of business because they wouldn't have profits, because selling for most companies in one way or another, marketing, selling, is how they generate profit. The industry of selling is very important to the free enterprise capitalistic system, which we are, of course. And so that's why I've been just so thrilled to spend all these years. We've had nearly 5 million people come to my seminars, which, that has to have had a good effect on the economies of lots of different cities and countries.
Did you say 5 million?
5 million, yeah.
That's a fantastic, phenomenal number. It's interesting though, when buyers say no, it is the fear of any salesperson to hear the word no. In a sales opportunity, and you hear no, not this time, or we chose somebody else, good job, but no thank you. So I think most salespeople are just like, the heart drops. And our reaction is like, oh my gosh, I just lost the deal. And like we start sulking and we walk away and we're like, what do we do? And then we start thinking about, well, maybe I should have done this differently. So how should salespeople react, I guess, internally when hearing the word no?
Well, I've tried to make it a game. You see, I've always felt, Mario, that life itself is a big game, and the field of selling is a game within the game of life. And there's rules in life that we must play to win, and there's rules in selling that you must play. And one of the first rules is realizing that the yeses in life are hidden behind the no's. And I try to teach the people that I have at my seminars that they've got to write down all their yeses. Like, say they want a new car because they've got a beat up piece of crap. That is a yes. They want a nicer, bigger home. That's a yes. They want to get out of debt. That's a yes. They want to have money in the bank. That's a yes. They want to have money to send their kids to school and educate them. That's a yes. So you've got to write down all the yeses in your life and realize to get the yeses, you have to handle no's, because the no's are the things hiding the yeses. So it's a big game you play. And I try to teach in selling that, and here's just a generality. Let's just say hypothetically a salesperson made $100 for getting the yes and closing a sale. They had to talk to 5 people to get the yes. Well, they had 5 people with 4 saying no and 1 saying yes. Now we take the 100 they earn and divide it by the 4 that said no, and now they've got a dollar value on the no, which is $25 for every rejection. Now, many managers, so when they hire a new salesperson, they should figure out the commission, the income they make to get the closed sale. Then figure out an average of how many people they might have to contact, then come up with how much they get paid for the no's on the way to the yeses. And now we've got a game called putting dollar value on no to get to the yeses.
Interesting. I've never actually thought about it that way. One thing for sure, I definitely, as a sales leader, that I always stood behind was, you called it write down their yeses, and I called it write down your whys, right? Which are the same exact thing. The principle is the same. And I like to say this was long before Simon Sinek ever started talking about understanding your why.
Right.
But the reality is I think this is an important element for salespeople. I remember, Tom, my background is really taking over underperforming sales teams and turning them around to reach the top. And one of the crews I took over was the global accounts organization. And these were like the large Fortune 100 type of accounts. And we had a team that was the worst performing team in the country. And we needed to turn this organization around to be able to be one of the top performing teams. And so one of the very first exercises I did, and I'm telling you this story because there's a point to this in terms of the listeners and what you're talking about and what I'm talking about. one of the very first exercises I did is I had everybody for 3 weeks plan out what I called their why board. You're going to call it the yes board. Why is it that you are coming in every single day? What is it that you want to accomplish professionally, personally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever the case might be? And document that down as to how this job, with this commission check, with this opportunity, with this work life, with this culture, will get you there. And one of the best stories I had was I had a gal that came in. Her name is Robin. And she came in and she announced that she wanted to open up a bed and breakfast in Brazil. Now, I knew that this was a true emotion feeling for her because she had been taking trips to Brazil for 9 years earlier for 6 weeks out of the year. So I knew this was the case. So this was a real strong why. And I said, well, how much will it cost you? She didn't have an answer. Where in Brazil do you want to do it? She didn't know. And I said, by when do you want to do this? And she didn't have a time frame. So I said, so all you really have is an idea, not really a reason. And so she went back. Her assignment was to go back, put the answers to those questions I just asked. She came back. She represented it to the whole entire region. And she said she needed $250,000 extra so that she could do this in 5 years. And I told her, as a leader, actually, no, we're going to do this in 2 years. And she looked at me. She said, how the heck are you going to tell me what my why is? and so I said, no, we're going to do this in 2 years. And what we did was, and I want to get your opinion on this, we worked backwards into the compensation plan. How much or how big of a deal do we need to close within one of your global accounts that you've got in order to be able to get you to this $250,000 extra payout? So we picked one of her largest clients. We came up with a strategy 1 year and 1 week later from the date of that meeting.
Fabulous.
We signed a contract for a $40 million contract.
Fabulous.
So your thoughts, is that what you mean when you talk about this concept of know your yes, know your why?
Yes, and you're living a concept that I just beat people up with, and that is to be terrific, you must be specific. Meaning you can't have nebulous goals, nebulous things you want to accomplish. You must be very specific as to the amount of money, what your long-term goals are, what you want to earn monthly. And this is what the average person doesn't do. I call it the life's blueprint. See, a building is built with a blueprint before one shovel of dirt is turned on that vacant lot.
Right.
That means a man in his mind took the image of the building, put it onto paper, architecturally engineered every square inch, and then they built the building. But it would have never happened had someone not specifically put down the architectural rendering. And that's what you have to do with your life.
I think I'm going to steal that from you. I'll give you some credit for it in a blog, but that's a fantastic illustration, right? The life's blueprint. It's so important. I think so many sales folks, especially, not to stereotype, but our millennial generation that are entering into the sales force, they're not mapping out this blueprint, if you would. They feel like they want to be here or there. And even those that have been tenured, this is my 20th year in sales. Most of us have never really mapped out our life's blueprint. And you hit the nail on the head. My gosh, if we do this for the design of a building, why wouldn't we do it for the design of our life?
And you hit it right on the head, Mario, because when you walk into a beautiful structure, a building, this took years of mind and thought, and yet the average American sits around, goes, I want success, but hasn't articulated what it is. And so the sitting down alone, if you're married, you should have your husband and wife together. Throw your life 25, 30 years into the future. What are you going to have as a net worth? How much interest will your money make so you can live off the interest your money makes? How much are you going to own as far as real estate equities? All these things are how you build the future in the life's blueprint.
Which makes it that much easier. I think I'm going to pull words out of your mouth, or tell me if I'm right. But if you do these types of things, some of these exercises on the personal side, mapping out your life's blueprint, it makes hearing the word no on a sales opportunity that much easier to handle.
Yes, because you're realizing that's just the stepping stone towards the goal. The no's are the stones you must walk on to get to the yeses, which are your dreams and your goals.
I love that very practical, philosophical, personal side of how to manage through and deal with the no on a sales opportunity. Let me ask you another question. Thinking of this concept of when you get no's, we've all had them. I actually just recently had a no, and I thought, well, the customer made a very serious mistake. That was my perspective. But it happens, right? It happens, and that's okay. What are some ways that we, as salespeople, can think past, quote unquote, the no and potentially keep a sale moving forward?
Well, the first thing you have to do is I really still believe in a good, strong email that you write to someone who has told you no. Something like this, Dear Mario, I am so thrilled that you're happy with where you're going with your business. I am, of course, upset that it is a no to me, but I'm going to keep in touch with you over the years because I found many companies will come back to other people like us, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. So you'll hear from me. I'll be in touch, and I look forward to someday having your no turn into a yes.
Remember the deal I told you about with Robin, the $40 million deal? What I didn't say, that deal, the company that we worked for, we owned that $40 million deal 8 years back. And the company left us as a direct result of performance or this or whatever it may be. And the decision makers were all still there, right? They were all still there. And we had to work over the course of 8 years to get us back to a position to turn that no into a yes.
Yeah, well, see, follow-up and keeping in touch are two things that most people and companies don't do. But I was a nut. If I had a lead or even a possible future transaction, I would follow up till they buy or die. And that was something I kind of lived by. And I had people said, gosh, 6 years you've been following up on us, and now we're ready to do business with you, only because you refused to stop contacting, sending the thank you notes, having the Christmas cards and the Thanksgiving card, all the stuff I did. I was a follow-up nut. And that's how I built so many long-term relationships.
Yeah. And do you think that still applies today in the follow-up process, that buyers, we talk about the modern buyer and how the modern buyer has changed the game on sales, right? They're digitally connected, they're socially engaged, they are mobile attached, and they're video hungry, right? So there's all this thing that they're doing. Gartner says, and CEB says, 61% of the research is already completed prior to actually picking up the phone and calling a salesperson. Do you think that the methodologies of follow-up go backwards 10 years ago are still the same methodologies that you would use today for follow-up?
In fact, even more important, because today everything is not touch me, feel me, not personal. It is electronic. And I know that I have 10 thank you notes, and people now seeing or hearing our message, they can go to my free resource page at tomhopkins.com, and I'll have all 10 of my thank you notes. And I totally believe, Mario, that to write someone a handwritten thank you note, which no one is doing, will have such more power today than it did back even when I did it and I started it. And I had every real estate broker copy my thank you notes. And now all these salespeople around the world are saying his thank you notes work because no one else is doing it. And I believe that in times of competition, you do the things no one else is doing and you stand apart and above your competition, and thus you get the business.
Fantastic insight. In fact, I don't know if by the time that this podcast publishes, I will have published an article on the Huffington Post. I just completed, as a matter of fact, today, an article that is talking about putting some human touch back into our touch points with our customers. And it's an article with Sendeso that actually helps organizations write those handwritten notes that, to your point, 99% of the time, you're going to receive a digital email as a follow-up to a discussion. 300 other emails in a day are hitting that box.
That's right.
So you brought up a point here, Tom, which I absolutely love. It's this concept of standing out from the crowd.
Right.
And I think both you and I were on the Sales Reinvented podcast with Paul Watts.
Right.
And that was actually the name of the podcast that came out with me was Stand Out from the Crowd. And I think that's a valuable point you bring up for all of our listeners is we've got to find ways to be able to stand apart from the competition. And the last time that I actually got a true letter or handwritten note from somebody in the mail, well, I can't even think of it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, right? Do you believe that regardless of the buyer type though, so let's put the Gen Y in the decision-making authority spot. Let's put the millennial in the decision-making authority spot. Do you believe that regardless of the buyer type, that type of note has the same meaning?
Well, I will say this, it will increase your percentages of business. And I always look for anything I can do to stand away from the competition, do something no one else does. And I used to do things like whenever I would make a sale, besides meeting the children, I would always say to the parents, I love their birth dates because I'd like to send them a nice little birthday card. And then I had the kids all in a file of every one of my buyers and sellers. And on their birthdays, they'd get a nice little card, maybe a little small amount of money. And their parents never forgot that I kept in touch with their children as to their birthdays. And then, of course, I used to always get the anniversary date they were married. And 3 days before the anniversary date, I would send them an anniversary card. And Mario, I can't tell you the number of men that called me almost whispering, Tom, I can't thank you enough for that card. I forgot last year. I got chewed out. Thanks so much, my man. Appreciate you. All because of doing things the average salesperson didn't do.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I wonder how many CRM systems deployed in a sales organization are tracking the personal related information that is needed, just like what you described.
Very few.
And that's a shame, right? For all of our sales enablement listeners and our sales operations folks, this reminds me of the conversation with Brian Fanzo that we had on Selling with Social. And Brian said, do you even know the preferred method that your buyer wants to engage with you on? It might be, I have a buyer who only wants to respond via text. For whatever reasons, he only wants to text with me. Okay, I will still make the appointment and I will still come out and meet you over text if you don't want to answer my call, right? I'm okay with that. But how many of us are tracking that? Very few.
That's right.
And you think about this element of the personal touch, and this is a really, really strong message, I think, for sales enablement, sales operations. Human to human is not dead. And this element that what you just described of human to human interaction and making sure that you personally touch someone, that you're personally remembering things that are important to them is ever so critical, in my opinion, to the sales process. Why are we not recording this information in our CRM?
Well, and one thing I used to do when I would make a sale of a property, both the buyer and seller, I would sit them down and let them know that our company believes in the importance of follow-up and keeping in touch. And that's why they've asked me. I always blamed the upper management of the company. So it's not me as a salesperson. The company has asked us to get certain information, and I hope you'll help me out to make my manager happy. So what he'd like us to know is, first of all, we'd like to just know a couple things about you. For example, I would get the birth dates because they have a little program that they'd like to send you something, and the children's birth dates. Then, of course, what date were you guys married? Then I put all this in the dang file, and bang, I'm keeping in touch, following up, doing things no other salesperson does, and I'll never lose them as a client because of this uniqueness of my Keep in Touch follow-up program.
Yeah, fantastic insights. So is it possible, Tom, that when you get a no, that you can actually turn that no really into a yes and keep the sale moving forward?
Well, of course, I teach words to say to where what you can say when they say no into a yes. But I also feel that, there's three types of no's. There's a very sincere no, they're not interested. There's the no that's a stall putting you off because they're not sure. And then there's one that they've learned to use as a learned no. And a pro realizes they have to ask questions. qualify them. John, my manager is going to ask me, based on our product and our service, why you have said no, and I hope you'll help me by telling me why. Now, many times they would start, and if it was a husband and wife, they'd start bantering. And oftentimes one of them would say, I don't think we ought to say no. I'm pretty excited about what Tom's offering here. And they'd sell each other just because I asked questions. See, everything in life can be turned from a no to a yes by questioning and not telling. And that's one of the things that in all of my training, I say, question and listen, don't talk and tell. And if you ask the right questions, you'll find out what you need to know to turn no's into yeses.
Mm-hmm. Great point. And also, tell me what you think about this in terms of strategies. I think this is probably the important element of sales today is maybe traditionally as we've grown up, oftentimes there was single-threaded type of decision-making, one decision maker or a decision maker. But now oftentimes what you're finding is that this is a multi-threaded type of approach in our sales approach, and that there are multiple influencers, multiple buyers that are engaged on this. And so sometimes it's also of benefit to have multiple relationships that can help you potentially turn that no into a yes if you've got a strong enough influencer on this buying committee that can help turn things around for you.
Definitely. And I always said that when you're doing a committee presentation, which is 2 or 3 people, it's so important that you ask questions, see who the real decision maker is. Oftentimes, the person that says nothing and is kind of holding themselves back, they are the final decision maker. So it's so important that you kind of ask, hey, I'm curious if everything we're offering today makes sense and is a good decision for your company, who other than yourselves would be involved in the final decision? So I want to know if a third party is coming in, Mario, after I pour out everything I can and give them all the financial aspects. I want to know if they got another party coming in. Because if they do, then I'll handle it differently when I go into the final closing of the sale.
Yeah. Good point. So thinking about when a buyer really means no, like no really means no, how do we get over that? As a salesperson like that, I take that hard. It like hits right here. It like hits my heart because you put sometimes your heart and soul, your life, your energy, everything into it, and you think you have it nailed, and all of a sudden you get the answer no. How do we actually get over the no and move on?
Well, I think it's part of the big game you have to play. If you look at any sport, people that only hit 300 are successes in baseball. And any activity where they're better than 50%, they're home run hitters or they're the greatest. And I think you have to just look at it like that. You have to almost sell yourself on selling and the fact that this is part of the life I'm going to have to live. And again, you have to come back to the yeses and what you want to achieve in life. Your goals have to be short-term and long-term committed. I think you have to kind of say, hey, there is inevitable no's I'm going to have to receive, but that's just the life I've chosen. Now, here's the nice thing. When you make enough money to have your money make enough money till you don't have to work, you'll never get any no's and you'll have a great life because you're financially independent.
Yeah, exactly. So this takes us right back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, which is creating your life's blueprint.
Right.
And allowing that to motivate you to keep on pressing forward, even though you may have lost the big kahuna, right?
Right. And this is the sad part about so many people in life is they haven't taken the time to sit down either by themselves or with their spouse and say, you know what, well, let's really articulate what we want to achieve in life. And let's figure out what our 10, 20, 30-year goals are. What's our net worth going to be? What are we going to have as far as our trappings, our material things? And again, the average American spends more time planning the 2 weeks of their vacation every year than planning the details of their long-term success, which again is a shame because so much can happen when you know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. So you really need to be serious about this thing called time planning, goal setting, and, articulate where you want to be in your future. And I think if you do that, you'll have a great life. You'll end up enjoying your golden years in a dignity that the average person doesn't. But it does take finding mentors. And that's another thing that I want to just stress real quick, that it's so important you look for mentors, people that you can want to emulate, people that you respect, people that have earned the right to become a mentor, to where you take their knowledge. They're all willing. The most successful people I know, they want to reach down and help folks that aren't successful. They want to say, hey, I've been fortunate. God's blessed me with abundance, and I want to help you reach this too. Yeah. But you have to find them. You've got to kind of look out for those mentors and, read their books if they are an author, listen to their CDs, turn your car into a classroom, which I've tried to get all of my people. We'll have 5,000 hours driving time in a vehicle for the average time in business. Now, that can either be music or negative news, or you can put people in your car and turn your car into a classroom. Good advice.
Yeah, it is great advice for sure. Well, it's funny that you mentioned about the whole mentor thing. Right before the recording of this podcast here, I had a follower who's from Sweden and found me. He's been following me for a year. He actually was visiting the Bay Area on vacation with his family, and he reached out to me and said, would you give me some time on your calendar so that I can just come and learn from you? And our hourly rate is minimum $500 an hour for me to sit down with somebody and talk with them and coach them. But this was somebody who took the time to want to learn.
Right.
And I said, absolutely. So what I got out of this was a great Starbucks drink, a nice little grapes and fruit and the little fruit dish, and a fantastic conversation to help somebody get to where they want to get to, right? And I think most people, whether you're an influencer or whether you're a sales manager or whether you are multi-bazillionaire, they want to give back somehow, some way with the time that they've got. And it just requires us, as you said, to map out the blueprint, figure out what we want to be, who we want to be, and then try to figure out, is there somebody in our network or somebody that I want to get to know that I can emulate and that can help me get there? And then ask.
Definitely. And what's amazing, if you call people that are very successful and very with tremendous humility, say, I have watched what you have done, and I would be so honored at my expense to come and spend an hour and just talk with you and get ideas. These people will do it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, I love getting on a plane every week, flying somewhere in the world. And of course, at my seminars, I not only teach for the whole day, but we have questions and answers. And of course, I ask them to please write down anything I can clarify for them, because I think teaching is something that is such a blessing when you can help people have a better life.
Yeah.
And that's what I think you on your show, and I, of course, in my presentations, try to do. Make them walk away being better than they were before they walked in.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair point. A couple other questions that I wanted to just ask you. If you were to think about all the different strategies that you teach for the salesperson or the sales leader or both, and I said to you, Tom, tell us the 1, 2, or 3 things that you want salespeople or sales leaders to stop doing right now, what would it be?
Number 1, stop taking failure and rejection personally. And the way you do that is play a game with it by learning how to say whenever you are told no and rejected, I never see failure as failure, but only as a learning experience, or the negative feedback I need to change course in my direction, the opportunity to develop my sense of humor, the game I must play to win. And by releasing the anxiety and stress that rejection causes by playing a game with it, you'll be amazed how you keep your attitude. And attitude is everything. And I think it's an ability to cope with crisis, an ability to handle no's, an ability to not take rejection personally, And that's another big part of the big game of life and selling. And that's something you have to learn. And of course, these are the things that I have tried my best to teach. And at my seminars, people have to totally learn learning experience, negative feedback I need, game I must play to win, develop sense of humor. They have to learn to make this the release of the anxiety of being rejected.
That's $1 million advice right there. I love it. That's fantastic, Tom. And if you think about the things that you would suggest to a salesperson who is just entering into sales, first year, second year, third year, what is the one piece of advice that you might give them?
I hope you realize but I don't need to sell a book, but I will say my first book, How to Master the Art of Selling, which is sold approaching over 1,700,000 copies, is the blueprint of what I consider success in selling. And of course, they can go and see all of our products and stuff, but I'd love to become their mentor because obviously now that Zig Ziglar has passed away, I'm the oldest out there training salespeople with 5 million that have come. So I would love to have them say, hey, I'm going to let Tom be my mentor. And I would be honored, flattered. And they can do that by coming to see our website, tomhopkins.com. And that would be great to have one more story of someone I've helped be more successful.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure for those of you who are listening that we'll put on the show notes here of the podcast, the book that Tom just mentioned, as well as the web link so that you can figure out where Tom's at so you can get to one of his seminars for sure. Tom, I always like to ask this question of all my guests. It is on the personal side of things, just so that we can close out with something on the personal side. Your all-time favorite movie of all time, what is it?
Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
That's on the top of my list. And it's so funny you'd say that because when I first saw that, I thought, my goodness, what selling they did in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. So that's my number one movie.
I love it. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. We'll take note of Tom's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And Tom, it's truly been a privilege having you on Selling with Social. I want to thank you very much again. You've given some fabulous, valuable insights. And last question for you, my friend, is if somebody wants to be able to connect with you, reach out to you, what's the best methodology? Is this follow you on Twitter, ask to connect with you on LinkedIn? What is the best methodology?
All of that is great. Or they can go to my Facebook, tomhopkins.com. And my key contact lady is Judy Slack. Judy kind of knows everywhere in the world I'm at. And if someone says, I really need to talk to Tom, she'll make sure that happens.
Yeah, Judy was fabulous, and she will make sure it happens. That's for sure. I can attest to that. Well, Tom, great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for all of the valuable insights. And until next time, I definitely appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, Mario. All the best to you and your wonderful listeners.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for listening to the Selling with Social podcast. I'm super pumped that you are our guest today. Here's what I want you to do right now. Go to jr.com/podcast and support our podcast, please, by distributing it out anywhere you can get it to on social. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes. You'll find all the instructions there on the site on how to subscribe to the Selling with Social podcast. Until the next show, keep on rocking. Mario Martinez Jr. out.